G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David, and if you're a regular listener, welcome back. If you're a new listener, you're in for a real treat today. I often talk about our guests being best in breed, and if you're not a loyal listener and you like to kind of dabble in the side in other property podcasts, I am sure you've come across Pizza and Property Podcast with the host Todd Sloan. He does an amazing job, so if you do need something on the side to supplement this, go for it. But Todd, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, man. Happy to be anyone's side piece.
That's what I thought. Is that a compliment or is it a backhanded compliment?
Kind of makes me feel like a mistress, but let's run with it. Yeah.
There's no commitment. Yeah. May I also say thanks very much for coming in. Really appreciate it. I've admired your work and what you guys are doing and putting out there in the Pizza and Property Podcast. I've seen what you've done with your book. So I guess we're going to dive into all that and more today. But before we do kick off, I've had a read through your bio. You had an accident in a drill rig.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, that rendered you not walking for 4 years. That's got to be something that we...
I could still walk. I was not walking properly. So I walked with a limp and I was in chronic pain all the time. And I wasn't a super pleasant person. Yeah.
Pain will do that to someone though, won't they?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. And was that the catalyst for you then, I guess, going, look, I need something outside my normal gig and moving into property? Or what was that transition like for you to move into property?
Pretty much. So it was actually work cover for 4 years.
Right.
It was not a fantastic time. And then I ended up getting the help that I needed to start walking properly again. And I took it to a different level and then walked from Adelaide to Melbourne. Yeah. And I did that for charity. And then I remember I actually heard an ad on the radio. We've got a station in Adelaide called Fresh FM. Yeah. And it's like a dance kind of music station. And there was this ad for a company that no longer exists anymore. And it was basically, would you like to be a real estate agent? I thought, well, I need a job now. I can't go back to drilling. Like that's not a career for me anymore. Yeah, I like real estate. Let's do this. And I was super keen on the property investing side, and I couldn't work out why. I talked to them and I talked to a few other agencies. None of them wanted to talk about property investing and like my passion for it. They all wanted to talk about walking to Melbourne. I later found out why, because there is so much persistence, the grit, the determination you need to push past those initial 6 months, 12 months of being a real estate agent. They were looking at someone that's just walked 800 kilometres kind of going, well, you can do that, you can do this. Like, yeah.
There's a lot of parallels, I guess, you draw out of that, right? Like the long game, you just don't suddenly put your shoes on and start walking from Adelaide to Melbourne, right? There's prep work that's involved, there's teamwork that's involved, there's mindset work that's involved. When you take someone that's done that and you go, no wonder you can apply that to a discipline like, say, property investing or building your business or building your profile, for example, because it's not an overnight success where you just people see the highlight reel and say, hey, everything below or beneath the surface, you've been there, done that, you've had to conquer that before you actually put the shoes on, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think they could see that. And I ended up staying in real estate for real estate sales for almost 8 years. Yeah. I think it was just under 8. And it was a great career, taught me a lot. One of the things it did also teach me though is so many real estate agents just didn't really have that love or in some cases even a knowledge for property investing. Like their focus was sales, and there were some that were fantastic salespeople. Yeah. But when it came to like asking a simple question of like, hey, what's the yield on this? They're like, oh, rent's for $500 a week. And you're like, yeah, but what's the price? Oh, what do you mean? And there's just simple little things they didn't quite understand. So I found a real niche in that where I would help people on the renovation side. You'd sit down with them and they just had a generic pitch from another agent. And then I'd pull it back to like, okay, what are your numbers? How much are you actually spending on this reno? What are you actually wanting this to achieve? And I would always push up against the border of financial advice. So I'd have to have that very big, clear disclaimer conversation of like, talk to a financial advisor. Yeah. But here's the real facts from like an investing perspective. And as my portfolio began to grow, and I went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, et cetera, rental properties and renovated my way there, then the Pizza and Property Podcast started to grow. That really started to grow as well, the client side of things, because people started looking at it going, yeah, well, this guy knows what he's talking about now. And I started getting the runs on the board, and I enjoyed the renovation side a lot more than the sales. Hence why, almost 8 years, and I left it.
Nice one. So how did the initial goal or that movement around renovations kind of kick off for you? Because some people, look, they're going to buy flips, for example, or the buy and hold. Your flavor is renovating. How did that kind of?
I was poor. It's as simple as that.
Necessity.
Yeah, pretty much. I was earning $38,000 a year.
Doing what?
As a real estate agent.
Oh, right. Okay.
I wasn't good to start with. It took me a while to find my stride. And to be completely honest, like the transparency side of things, I could sell houses really well. This is why, like Valerie Timms, she was wonderful. She kept me around for so much longer than I would, and I owe her a lot. There was several conversations that we had that were the hard word of, look, Todd, we love you, want to keep you, but unless you list something in the next week, we have to show you the door. That's a very motivating conversation to get. Yeah. And I'd always just pull it off on the last minute and I'd make it happen. But I think one of the reasons she kept me is because when I would take over other people's listings, I'd get a great result. I would take care of the client really well. I'd sell it really well. I'd get better than what they're expecting. So she's like, okay, this is good. But where I fell down was listing presentations. I didn't know that balance between selling myself, where if you're too passive, people are like, okay, do you even know what you're doing? And then if you're too egotistical and you're like, oh, I'm the greatest, then it's kind of like, dude, like calm down. There's this real balance between the two. And it actually wasn't until I lost a family friend's listing that it was the catalyst for me that changed everything. And I remember I was quite annoyed, but I even thanked him afterwards because I said, look, do you mind me asking why you didn't pick me? And when I say family friend, like I've known this guy since I was a child.
Yep.
And he's like, Todd, look, obviously we love you, like all the rest of it, but the other guy came in with the plan. You came in, you said all this stuff, like we think we'd still do well with you, but he made us feel so comfortable that he listened, we were here. He's like, where do you want to be? And it's like, okay, cool, we want to be here. And then he just showed us all the steps in between. And I was like, okay, I know what I need to do now. And after that, I drew up these things called set to sell plans. And they end up becoming like a standard in the company because I found that if that's what I was doing wrong, I need to do it. And funnily enough, I got a call. This is back when $1 million listing was like a big deal, and in Adelaide as well. So that was a big deal. This penthouse, this lady I've been chasing for years. She was on the market for something crazy, like 600 days. And I'd call her every few months and it's like, hey, Jennifer, like, how's it going? Like, ready for a second opinion yet? Eventually she calls me. It's just after I had this conversation. And she's like, Todd, you think you can sell it? Come around tonight. It's yours. I'm like, oh my God. Best 3-piece suit on. I'm like running out there. And I go through the whole set to sell plan. And she said yes. And she was like, she just had this different level of confidence. I think originally she got me in the door because I was so persistent. But then when we spoke about it all, it was like, oh, no, you actually know what you're doing. And that clicked for me. And ever since then, I'd used a set to sell plan at every single appointment because what I realized was it wasn't about me. It was about how can I help other people understand the clearest possible way to get to where they want to go. And when I did that, it all changed. And I stopped earning $38,000 a year and just struggling to get by. And I started earning much better money. And I think it was before then too. So I tell stories in circles. That's right. Know if you listen to the show.
It connects, the dots will connect at the very end. So keep going.
And coming back to it, as all of this was happening, I wanted to renovate. I wanted to build a portfolio. I was about, what was I now, 30-ish years old. And I think I just finished the ride from Darwin to Adelaide. And I got to this point where I was like, I'm living in a penthouse in the city that was rented. Yeah. The only property I had was a 2-bedroom apartment in the city that I couldn't renovate, I couldn't develop, I couldn't do anything with it. It had hardly gone up in value. I sold that. And then I thought, what can I buy? I had hardly any serviceability. You're a mortgage broker. You know, if I come to you with 38 grand a year, you're probably going, what do you want to do? Like
we're buying a property of hopes and dreams is what we're doing.
Pretty much, yeah. And so I shopped and I went to a regional location. And I'm always torn on this because if someone was to give me this property now to say, could you look at this? I'm thinking of buying it. I don't know if I would actually say yes. And then I'd actually probably say no because it was a regional town, 15,000 population, something like that. It was $62,500. It was a transportable home that they'd trucked in 5 years earlier and they went bankrupt. No power, no septic, not even needed a power pole, no water, nothing. And I looked at it and I thought, I know I can turn this into money. And it cost me, I think, around $30,000. And I ended up turning it into, what was it, 62.5 to the 30, and then I got it revalued for 125. We're not talking big bickies. but we were talking just enough to go, I can pull that equity out now and I can go to the next one. And that's exactly what I did. And I started earning a little bit more money then. I went to another property to do exactly the same thing. This was 110,000. And what was that? We spent 9,000 on it, got it revalued for 165. I actually went through a separation, then had to give her half of it.
Okay.
But it was, even with that, it was just enough equity to get to the next one. And like that 110,000, that's in Murray Bridge. That would now be worth 330, 350.
Nice.
Like they've still done well over time. But we're only talking in 2019, I reckon that was purchased around then, roughly. Yeah. But in answer to your question, it was that necessity of, if I'm going to do it now, I'm in my early 30s, I'm going into full sacrifice mode, I just need to do it with the tools that I've got. They might be blunt. They might even be the wrong tool. I might be using the back of a screwdriver as a hammer, but let's do it. Let's make it happen.
So going what you've gone through, do you see investors who go, I'm constrained by borrowing capacity, or I'm waiting for the right property, or I want to buy in a particular location? You're going, hey, mate, just get in. Like, is there a sense that you go, hey, mate, just roll your sleeves up, get into the market as quickly as you can? You've done it. Or do you then say, hey, look, buy when you're emotionally ready? Because there's these conversations that you're probably having with a lot of investors going, they're mentally just, it's percolating a little bit, but they're failing to act.
So it's a balance of both. Action is absolutely the key to it all. But if I, you know, that classic question, you might even have it on your question sheet, like the whole, what would you tell your 10 years ago self, or like go on the time machine, that kind of thing. Right now for me, I was in a career where if you get good, there's some incredible upside.
Yeah.
If I went back to 30-year-old me now, whatever that is, 6, 7 years ago, I would have said, don't renovate just yet, mate. Like you're doing good, but if you can really master this sales side of things quicker, really double down on that, you can turn that 38 grand a year into 100 grand a year real quick. Then you can turn that 100 into 200 and 300 and 400, then go to the bank, then make sure that you can really build something substantial. It's not to say I did the wrong thing. It's just to say that there was possibly a better choice for me. But this is where it comes back to, everyone's different. Because you might not be in a situation where you can just double your income by getting better. You might be in a job where it's like, I earn 65 grand, 100 grand, whatever it is. It's like, that's what I'm earning. Unless I get a side gig or a side business or something, that's what it is. It's like, well, if that's the case, yeah, you need to operate within the parameters that you've got. That's probably the difference I'd see between the two.
Yeah, okay. And then to answer that question, we go, hey, look, in hindsight, what would I do differently, better, lessons that you learned? What's your response to a question like that?
Well, it would be that I would have doubled down on the sales side, gotten better sooner, and I would have earned more money quicker, because that would have put me into better asset classes.
Okay.
Like I look back at so many properties now that I could have bought in Adelaide, and yeah, even if I just stayed in Adelaide, and I remember even looking at Logan, because we've got a couple of rentals in Logan, we were looking there, and this is good, but there's still like 250 grand, and I couldn't even afford 250 grand at the time. That's how restrained it was. But if I'd started earning 100 grand sooner, and like 100, that's not bad money, but that's not exactly setting the world on fire. It's not crazy.
I mean, it's median income at the moment.
Exactly.
And you can't even afford a median house.
Yeah.
So it's a conundrum right there.
Yeah. But if I had done that sooner, like I feel that, things would have been very different, because now the properties that we do have there, and the ones in like Morphet Vale, which is like probably more like the Adelaide equivalent of Logan, they've done tremendously well. One we bought for 212,000, and that's probably worth about 650 now. And again, that was bought in 2019, 2020. Wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, fair enough. You get to interview a lot of people on pizza and property.
Yeah.
Where do you feel like the common successful attributes are, and the people that you've kind of met along the journey that you're going, they had great intentions, but they fell off the wagon a little bit as well? Have you seen that?
Fell off the wagon. I have to think about that one. As far as common threads, everyone. Actually, what scale do you want to talk at? Because if you want to talk at that, like what I would classify as like just good, moderate success, if you've got a portfolio of 2-3 million, that's to me, and I feel arrogant saying that, but I shouldn't, because in my mind, that's like you're doing really well, good on you, but that's not like the 20 million, how the hell have you done it kind of thing. So
there are scales. So you've got some people. I mean, Sam's obviously setting the world on fire.
Sammy's doing amazing,
incredible.
Things. Yeah,
I'd call him like a unicorn in the property world, right?
But he's glued to that. He's glued that horn to his head himself, though. Like everything that man's got, he's worked for.
Yes.
Like he's. Yeah, I can see what you mean by a bit of a unicorn.
Because you look at some of the experienced BAs like your Victor Kumars of the world, for example, and Munzerul Khan's, like big portfolios, time in the market, for example, done exceptionally well. Sam's done well, and there's people that aspire to be them, but there's a big gap between what they're willing to do and sacrifice and the effort they've got to make versus what they're willing to, I guess, pull the trigger on as well.
That's it. Like, and if you want to look at what he's done, there is nothing, like to use Sammy as the example, there's nothing Sam's done that other people can't do.
Yeah.
There's just things that Sam's done that a lot of people won't do. And I think that's the difference. It's like, I figured this out years ago with like the popularity side of things. When I was at school, I used to get bullied quite a lot. And I remember when I was in year 9, I don't even know, looking back on this now, it's a strange thought, but I stopped talking and I just thought, I'm just going to listen to people. And I listened to people for, it was like 4, 5, 6 months. It was a long time. And I figured out the common denominator between the popular kids versus the loser kids, loser kids, I'll say, was that the popular kids were all really good at something. They all doubled down. It didn't even matter what it was. And that was when I doubled down on skating. And I thought, well, if I want to stop getting picked on and bullying, I'll get into skateboarding even more. And I was already skating a bit, but I ended up turning into a sponsored skater and absolutely loved it. And I think it's the same thing kind of now when you look at really successful, because let's face it, like the success of today is the popularity of school. And that success usually comes down to people being really good at things. So coming back to your question of what are those things, most of the time it's consistency, it's discipline, and it's doing what everyone else doesn't want to do. Because if you do all of that stuff, generally like the whole cold showers or ice baths and more, no one wants to do that. But if it sets you on the right path of thinking and you can see how that connects to the next thing that leads you to that successful thing, maybe it's the thing you got to do. But in isolation, it seems ridiculous. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And I'll draw on, I listened to, I'm not sure if you heard the Huberman and Goggins podcast where they talk about the things that you don't want to do.
Actually, I haven't seen the one with those. I've seen both of them a lot in isolation, but not
the latest one they did together. Yeah. And I shared it with my own team as well. It's the things that you don't want. I think they call it the amygdala is the part in the brain. What you don't want to do, and if you keep doing that, it grows bigger. Whereas the amygdala in, say, obese people is very small, or people that aren't driven.
So the amygdala is like the discipline part of your brain.
That's what they're calling it, the willpower part of your brain.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and so I've had a really good conversation with a team member going, they didn't want to do something. I was like, that's cool, but if you do it, you know that it's gonna really change your physiology and the way that your brain makeup is kind of consisted of. And that's where I feel like, okay, the penny's now dropping and going, if you don't want to do something, but you do it, that's where the real growth is going to happen and occur as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're all just a few changes away from the successful life we want.
Yeah.
It just comes back to, do we want to make the changes?
Yeah. Yeah. It's how badly do you want it as well. There's got to be a little bit of pain sometimes, or there's got to be a bit of hunger in the belly is what I also see for a lot of people. So they want to change their narrative. They want to change their story about where they want to get to. Their future identity needs to shift as well.
Yeah, the carrot or the stick.
Yeah.
Really. Like, and there's some people, like one in particular, who I won't mention who it is, but extraordinarily successful, been on the show. And I remember talking to them not long ago, and they're still motivated by the stick, not the carrot.
Right.
And they've got this fear of being poor. And it's like, you are not poor. You are nowhere near poor, and it doesn't look like you're ever going to be poor again. But it doesn't matter. That fear is still that driving factor. And I think that to a certain extent, it doesn't matter where it comes from. But I think if you're continuously driven by the fear side of things, I just don't think it's a nicer way to live, really. Surely that's going to escalate the crap out of your cortisol levels and just make you feel pretty average.
And you're probably making poorer decisions from that mindset as well.
Evidently not, because they're wildly successful. Okay. So, but
if it works, I guess if it's working and that's their blueprint, then maybe it's like the fire they need to keep them going.
Yeah.
If it's that way they're wired. Your end game. So, I mean, you're on the journey and 10 properties, as you mentioned, and I'm sure there's probably some plans to build your portfolio. So what does the future look like for yourself, Todd?
So more renovating. We're going to be we're looking at a few different blocks of units at the moment.
Okay.
One of the big stalls, there was actually a few stalls last year. Unfortunately, my wife and I went through a bit of difficulty with IVF and had to spend pretty much the whole deposit on 5 failed rounds of that.
I'm sorry to hear, man. That's a I won't say it's a common story, but I hear this time and time again, which is IVF can clear the bank. And,
and I didn't think it was common, and it's why I actually talk about it so openly now, because I had no idea. And 2023 was a very difficult year for myself and my wife, Bianca.
Yeah.
And it's why I'm so open, because I just think if anyone else is going through it, it is nicer to be like, oh, wait a second, I'm not completely alone in that.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that ended up clearing things out a bit. So, but replenishing deposits at the moment, because I grew very aggressively to begin with pulling out any little bit of equity, pushing it all the way to 90-10 LVRs, paying the LMI. It was just like, just keep moving, keep growing.
Yeah.
But now we're like, no, we're at a much healthier LVR now. Like the whole portfolio, including PPR, is probably about 4.6, 4.7. I think all up we owe about like 2.5, something like that.
Beautiful.
And it's good, but we want to keep it that way. And now it's about focusing on both of us building the businesses and really doubling down on funneling in profits in cash and building a bit more conservatively.
Okay.
So we're looking at a few different blocks of units, and it's going to be about renovating them, which now the challenge is going to be, because last purchase we made was a block of units.
Yeah.
It's not renovated yet though, because I actually rented out in government housing.
Okay.
And so it's borderline. It's like it wasn't a full-on reno project, but it was like another 5 years it will be. And the government housing organisation that I rent it to, it didn't officially say it, but basically said, yeah, look, if you make it too nice, then they cover any kind of tenant damage. And they're like, it's going to be really expensive for us. So if you just make it so it's like it's nice enough, it's livable, then that works better for them as well. So we've kept that there, but this next one is going to be very much push the equity uplift as much as possible, and not to pull it out, but to get to that end goal of 10 million portfolio value on a 50-50 LVR. Because at a 50-50 LVR with a 10 mil portfolio value yielding around 7%, because a lot of our purchases are quite high yielding and most of them are over 7% yield on purchase, then that's going to be producing 200K passive, and that's on P&I as well. Because we're on interest only at the moment, but you can't live on that forever. Yeah. That's a meantime thing.
Yeah. So the goal is then switch it to P&I. Some people have the idea that, well, I'll sell part of the portfolio, clear the debt. Is there any intentions that you go, hey, look, would sell? Or you go, look, let's just ride this thing out and keep it?
It's my ego, and I have no problem saying that. But I
think it takes a strong person to say it actually is my ego.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I talked to Steve McKnight about this a little while ago, and him and I have had a few chats, like off air, and he's a wonderful human being, and he challenged me on it when I told him the goal, and he's like, Todd, why don't you have a $5 million unencumbered portfolio, sell off your other 5? Why do you want 10, 15?
Yeah, the alternative, right?
Yeah. And I couldn't have an answer. Like I didn't have an answer. And I pondered it, and I talked to Bianca about it, and that's what we came up with. It is my ego. It's I know I can build bigger, do more, do better. Like, who needs to walk to Melbourne? You don't need to do that. Okay. And there is definitely a huge part of me that wanted to make a difference for the charity side of things. But I could have found much easier ways to raise the 10 grand that I raised for them. I didn't need to walk to freaking Melbourne. Yes. But that challenge of like, is it possible? Can I do something bigger? I think that comes from a place of ego. That doesn't come from a place of logic, because logic says, yeah, sell down. Like, yeah, it makes more sense.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see how you go with your portfolio in the future.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited. There's people that you may have come across as well that feel like they've left it too late. Mm-hmm. They go, missed the boat, for example. COVID's a really good example of that, where they've had this massive spike in property prices. Mm-hmm. Now they maybe there's two parts to this. One is they've missed the boat, or they can't afford to now get in.
Yeah.
How do you have those conversations to say, look, I still think you can, and there's alternate ways around it, but really it's a mindset shift that they're looking for to change gears. How do you have a conversation with someone in that situation?
Look outside wherever you're looking at the moment, because I interviewed a 21-year-old kid that worked at McDonald's the other day. You seen it?
Loved it.
Yeah. Shout out to Max. He had 4 rental properties. And given he bought in regional South Australia, okay? And I know that there is, because I've already had comments on it, people criticising his choice, people criticising where it was, things like that. That dude is giving it a go. He's doing it. And I can see that there's other people. Like, you remember when Birchie started?
Yeah.
Like he was, I think literally it was an $8,000 house in Kempsey that was burnt out. It was stuff that you'd look at and be like, what are you doing?
Yeah. I think there was stuff in like cans or like one bedders for
$20 grand on Anderson Road. I remember them. And there's stuff that was just like nuts. He's built an empire.
Yeah. And
love him, hate him, whatever. It's irrelevant on that side. But the point that I'm making is if you can find something that helps you grow, and again, it comes back to your constraints. If your constraints are like, this is my situation and it's not changing anytime soon, work within them. If you can expand your situation and fuel that serviceability tank more, probably concentrate on that more, because maybe you can get into, and when I say a better asset class, I don't necessarily mean like blue chip, because whilst again, blue chip works fantastically for some people, that the yield compression, or not yield compression, but just lower yield you can get in that is hard to grow. It really is. And I almost feel like it's an unofficial brag tax, because usually properties like this are the ones that you're happy to brag about with your friends. It's like, yeah, I just see that. I own that. That's pretty cool. And it's like, yeah, but it yields 2.5%. Whereas if you look at some of the properties like that I own, I'm not bragging to my friends about how amazing they look, because they don't, but they work as an investment vehicle. And I think that if people think they've left it too late, there might be a little bit of that mentality of, oh, but I have to buy this. It's like, you don't actually. There's all these other options out there that could potentially get you to your goal even faster, and you could get to them even faster. You just need to be open to them.
Beautiful. You mentioned it's Bianca, isn't it, your wife? Yeah. Financial literacy as a love language. How do you guys go? Because again, I taught that because it's not. I read in the AFR recently about couples and money. It causes a high number of end case divorces, but it's a moot point, stress point for a lot of relationships. How have you guys had this open conversation around financial future and literacy?
I feel like I'm quite lucky with Bianca, because she's very on the ball, that she's a little more risk averse than I am.
Is that good yin and yang energy in that sense?
Very much, yeah. Like, so we did an episode on Pizza and Property a while ago called Is Your Partner a Financial Fit? And I really wanted to make that episode for years, but I struggled to find an angle that basically didn't feel like, hey, you should leave your partner, because that wasn't what I was going for. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things, ended up doing it with a guy that was a psychologist and actually a broker as well. So it's this perfect little balance of like the clinical side of things, but then also the finance.
Yeah.
And one of the big takeaways I got from this was you need a cheerleader and a leader. And I'm absolutely the leader. Bianca is the cheerleader. There is no miscommunication about that. If that's not clearly established, then that's where things can really go wrong. I found that in previous relationships, we hadn't talked about this. And I'd have a partner that wanted to be the leader, but then she'd want to be the cheerleader, but then she'd want to be the leader. And then I'd be like, okay, well, I guess I can be the cheerleader, but I'm not really happy in that position. I want to be the leader. And again, you need to sort of park that sense of, well, I probably shouldn't say I'm being the leader. Am I being too egotistical? It's like, no, be honest with yourself. You need to really understand that. And there's this wonderful Simon Sinek video. Are you familiar with Simon Sinek? Yeah. And he talks about relationships of being this give and take. It's an excellent exercise if you ever want to do this with your partner. You got married? Yeah.
Married. We are in business together. So
you've probably
broken all the rules.
Okay. But it's basically about asking, what do you want to take from them? Energy-wise, like spiritually, sexually, financially, it's just the whole thing. And are they willing to give it? Because if they are, then it works. There's this connection, and vice versa. What do they want to take from you, and are you willing to give it? And we went through this very early on, and I was blown away that she even was happy to do these exercises. And we worked out that the things that she wanted to take were the things that I was happy to give, and the things that I wanted to take were the things that she was happy to give. And so as a partnership, that exercise in isolation is probably the most valuable thing you can do, I believe, with a partner to make sure you're on the same page. Because now looking back, I gave away one house to a failed relationship, and then half a profit of a project to another, because I made bad relationship decisions.
Yeah.
People don't think that and they weren't bad people, like they were lovely women, but it wasn't the right fit for us.
Sure.
And if you don't think it's a financial decision, but especially if you're married for a long time, it's one of the biggest financial decisions you'll ever make.
And so I think Dave Ramsey has some really good points around this as well.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I think these are the 4, if you can agree on these 4 areas in life, you've got a pretty strong foundation as a relationship. One is finances. One is spirituality, or if you're religious. The next one is how to raise children. Mm-hmm. The last one, I'm going to have to dig it up. It's just left my memory. But let me find that, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. But yeah, to your point, it's that alignment is time and time again what we're seeing, the yin and yang energy. You talk about cheerleader, leader. Mm-hmm. The analogy that we give to a lot of people is only one person can really go out for the coin toss as the captain. You can't have 2 captains out there. It doesn't work. And I think you made a really, really good point around that.
Well, thank you.
The power of not taking no for an answer, and this, I guess, is going to come back right to the very start in your journey, which is lower income, lower deposit, trying to knock on many doors to, I mean, like you said, brokers would probably say thanks very much and good luck at that point. But there had to be some level of resilience where you go, I'm not going to take no for an answer. Even you said back to your wall, and your employer was going, hey, look, you got to pull your socks up or you're out. How have you found building resilience, not taking no for an answer along your journey as well?
I don't want to say that it's me, because I feel like that's a cop-out answer, but I think that's the true answer. That I've always... Are you building resilience? Okay, probably skateboarding. And it's probably actually ties back to a feeling of wanting to fit in as a kid and not be bullied. There's probably some really deeper sort of emotional sort of things pushing this. But I remember just being so driven with skating. Yeah. And it taught me so much that, I did an interview recently with a guy that went to prison, just nosedived his life in the biggest way you can think of, and has completely turned it around. Now invests in property, loving family man, and now does talks at jails. And when we were chatting off air, it's like, there is so many similarities between his and my story. And then the thing was, he ended up having an ACL injury. For him, it was footy. For me, it was skateboarding. And he couldn't play footy anymore. And then things really went downhill. And I truly believe if I didn't have my skateboard, most of my friends at the time are now either dead or in jail or just not doing anything spectacular with their life. I reckon I'd be in that bunch if I didn't have that skateboard. And that really drove me. And it was probably that want to fit in that has then kept me on that right track, that taught me persistence. Because doing a kickflip, it's not that hard, but it takes you 1,000 bad attempts at a kickflip before you flip it around and you go, oh, wait a second, I can do this. And then, well, if I can do that, maybe I can do a 360 flip. Oh, if I can do that. And then you just keep building on it from there. So it was probably born from skateboarding, I think.
Awesome. I like it. Thanks very much. What's in store? What's the game plan for 2024? Obviously, good luck with trying to have a baby as well. I know that's a emotional, financial journey as well. So good luck this year. What else is on the radar for yourself?
So that's a big part of it. Also writing the book, finally picking that back up. We're partway through it now, probably a third of the way through, which is very exciting. I've got pages stuck all over the hotel room at the moment on the walls. So I'm going through all the audits of that. So that's 10 ways to 10 rentals. Yeah. And a few
and what's the premise of the book? Take us through what readers can expect on it.
So this is a project I actually picked up late 22, early 23, so about a year ago. And I went around interviewing 9 other investors and myself. Mike Mortlock actually interviewed me, and it was about 10 rentals in a portfolio. How did you buy number 1? Then how did you buy number 2? Then how did number 1 and 2, help you connect to 3.
Beautiful.
And then so on and so forth. And we've got people's incomes in there. We've got if they extracted equity, did they save up the money? Did they renovate their way there? Did they develop their way there? Like there's all of these different variables on a level of transparency that's just never been done before.
I agree.
And
because a lot of books are telling you what to do, you're going, here's how to do.
Well, and it's how to do from different angles, because I've already got a few people that have read a few of the chapters.
Yeah.
And one of them in particular is like, oh yeah, but this guy earned 200 grand a year. Like, I don't earn 200 grand a year. It's like, perfect. That's fine. But there's other people out there that do, that want to know how do you do it in that situation. And that's someone that's going to really connect with one of the chapters where they earn 60 grand a year, 70 grand a year, that kind of thing. Or myself starting on $38,000 a year. So I want to be able to show people that there's no one way. It's about finding the way that fits you the best.
Love it. Love it. And that's that whole one size fits all model isn't working. We see this time and time again when clients are trying to, I guess, follow someone else's success or take someone else's blueprint that they've done and gone, I want to build my portfolio. It's like, guys, that's the wrong strategy at the wrong time. It's the wrong strategy, right? Yeah. I always come back to a gym analogy. Is like, hey, if you want to try and go and build some muscles, you're not going to go deadlift 200 kilos the first time you jump in the gym. You got to work yourself up. And it's the same thing if you're starting versus where someone else has ended up. You can't compare the two journeys at all.
Isn't that a Jim Rohn quote that don't compare someone else's chapter 10 with your chapter 1?
There we go.
Something
That's exactly it. I hear Tom Panel say that a lot.
Yeah, he says that.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. You're at the starting line, they're at the finishing line, and you got to run your own race.
Yeah.
Which is what we're all about here. And I really hope you've connected with Todd's message. I think you've articulated it so well. Your journey, I think, is something that people will connect with a lot as well. The new book's going to be fantastic, I think, from a visual perspective and be able to see people's under the hood of people's portfolios. That's what you and I probably get to see day to day, which is the inner workings of people's portfolios, but to kind of make that open and transparent. That's a real kudos to what you're going to do, mate. So fingers crossed. Can't wait to see that come out. It's going to be exciting. If you've loved what Todd has put out, I highly recommend jumping on the Pizza and Property podcast. There's awesome resources on there as well. They got a good calculator around the renovation.
The cash flow side of
cash flow. I think that's awesome. There's some really good videos that you've got on there. So you've got a whole suite of resources. So if you're kind of keen to soak up some of that energy and that knowledge, jump on. We'll include all the links for Todd's website and then socials as well. And if you found this helpful, what we also love is if you leave us a review or subscribe to our channel as well. That's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. Until next time, take care.